The massive space station hung in the void like a jeweled crown, its crystalline spires reaching out in all directions. Zentara Prime was the most important place in the galaxy, where beings from 1,000 worlds came to make decisions that affected billions of lives. Ships of every shape and size docked at its countless ports, bringing delegates who looked nothing like each other but all shared one thing in common. They thought they were better than everyone else. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his small ship and stared at the station. The New Horizon was tiny compared to the other vessels around it. Where other ships gleamed with exotic metals and pulsed with strange energies, his looked like something built in a garage. The hull was plain gray steel, the engines burned simple chemical fuel, and the whole thing creaked when it turned too fast. "Not exactly impressive, is it?" said Lisa Chang from the pilot seat. She was young for a space pilot, barely 30, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Look at that thing next to us." Jake followed her gaze to a Vorthic warship that looked more like a living creature than a machine. Its surface rippled with colors that hurt to look at, and strange tendrils of energy danced around its hull. Even sitting still, it radiated power that made the hair on Jake's arm stand up. "Size isn't everything," said Ben Rodriguez, though his voice didn't sound convinced. The engineer was bent over a control panel, trying to coax a few more degrees of power from their struggling systems. "Remember what happened to the dinosaurs?" Amy Foster looked up from her diplomatic briefing materials and smiled. Ben has a point. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the biggest message. She was the team's diplomat, trained in the art of making people listen even when they didn't want to. Today she would need every trick she knew. Jake turned away from the window and looked at his crew. They were good people, all of them volunteers for this mission that everyone back on Earth thought was pointless. Humanity had spent 50 years begging for a seat at the galactic table, and now that they finally had one, most people expected them to be laughed out of the room within a week. "Remember why we're here," Jake said. "We're not trying to impress anyone. We're trying to show them that humans deserve a place in the galaxy. Even if they don't want us here," Lisa muttered. "Especially if they don't want us here." The docking process took 3 hours because the station's automated systems kept trying to send them to the cargo bays instead of the diplomatic berths. When they finally managed to convince the computer that they were actually delegates and not a delivery service, they found themselves assigned to a docking port so far from the main council chambers that they would need to take 4 different transport tubes to reach it. Jake and his team gathered their few belongings and stepped onto the station. The corridor they entered was beautiful beyond description, with walls that seemed to be made of captured starlight and floors that felt like walking on clouds. Other delegates moved past them in groups, talking in languages that sounded like music or thunder or the whisper of wind through leaves. Most of them stopped talking when they saw the humans, a group of ethereals, beings that looked like living crystal sculptures, actually stepped aside as Jake walked past. One of them made a sound like breaking glass that their translation devices rendered as laughter. "Look," it said to its companions, "the primitives have learned to walk upright." 3 Drachmarian ambassadors, each one 8 feet tall with scales that shifted from blue to gold depending on the light, blocked the corridor ahead. Their leader, a massive creature with eyes like burning coals, looked down at Jake with something that might have been amusement. "You must be the human delegation," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "We were wondering when the entertainment would arrive." Jake felt his face flush but kept his voice steady. "Captain Jake Morrison, representing Earth and the Human Colonial Alliance, we're honored to be here." "Honored," repeated the Drachmarian, and his companions hissed with laughter. "Yes, I suppose you would be. It must be exciting to leave your little dirt ball and see how real civilizations live. Our planet has its charms," Amy said smoothly, stepping up beside Jake. "Perhaps you would like to visit sometime. We have something called hospitality that you might find interesting." The Drachmarian's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Now, let's not frighten the mammals too badly on their first day. The speaker was Vorthek, one of the most powerful telepathic species in the galaxy. It stood 7 feet tall on legs like tree trunks, with skin that looked like liquid metal and eyes that held depths Jake couldn't fathom. When it spoke, Jake felt the words not just in his ears but somehow inside his mind, as if the creature was reaching directly into his thoughts. "Admiral Kestar," the Drakmarian said, and Jake heard something like respect in his voice. "I was just welcoming our new ... colleagues." "How kind of you," Admiral Kestar replied, though his mental voice carried layers of meaning that made Jake's head hurt. "I'm sure they appreciate your ... warmth." The Vorthak turned his attention to Jake, and suddenly Jake felt like a bug under a microscope. "Tell me, human, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here? Your species has been in space for what, a few decades? Your technology is barely beyond stone knives and bearskins. What wisdom could you possibly offer to civilizations that were crossing the void when your ancestors were still living in caves?" Jake met the alien's gaze and tried not to let his fear show. "We're here to learn," he said. "And maybe to offer a different perspective." "A different perspective," Kestar repeated, and Jake felt the words being examined, dissected, found wanting. "How refreshing. Tell me, what is your perspective on faster-than-light travel? On quantum consciousness manipulation? On dimensional engineering?" "I don't know anything about those things," Jake admitted. "Exactly," Kestar said, and Jake felt a wave of smug satisfaction wash over him from the alien's mind. "You know nothing, yet you presume to sit at the same table as your betters. It would be amusing if it weren't so pathetic." The group of aliens moved away, their laughter echoing off the crystalline walls. Jake and his team were left standing, alone in the corridor, feeling smaller than they had when they started. "Well," Ben said after a moment, "that went better than expected." Lisa snorted. "How do you figure that?" "Nobody tried to vaporize us," Amy put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "It's going to be a long week," she said. Jake nodded, watching the aliens disappear around a corner. "Yes," he said. "It is, but as they made their way toward the council chambers, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than simple prejudice. The way the aliens had looked at him, the careful way they had chosen their words, the almost ritual nature of their dismissal. It felt like a test. The question was, what kind of test, and what would happen if he failed it? The council chamber was a marvel that defied understanding. The ceiling seemed to stretch up forever, filled with swirling galaxies and distant stars that might have been real or might have been illusion. Delegates sat in floating platforms arranged in concentric circles, with the most important species near the center and the lesser ones pushed toward the edges. Where the artificial gravity was weaker and the air tasted stale, Jake found himself assigned to the very last ring, so far from the center that he needed binoculars to see the main speaking platform. The seat itself was barely more than a metal stool with a small control panel that didn't seem to work properly. Every time he tried to activate the translation system, it sparked and showed him menus in languages he couldn't read. "At least we made it inside," Amy whispered, settling into the seat next to him. Her diplomatic training had prepared her for many things, but sitting in what amounted to the galactic equivalent of the cheap seats hadn't been one of them. Lisa and Ben took the remaining spots in their assigned section, looking around at the incredible display of alien technology and culture. Beings of every imaginable shape and size filled the chamber. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Jake's mind hurt trying to process what he was seeing. There were creatures made of living light, beings that existed partially in other dimensions, and at least one delegate that appeared to be a sentient mathematical equation floating in a containment field. The session began with a sound like distant thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. High Counselor Vexnari, a being so old that his species was mentioned in creation myths, raised one of his many arms for silence. He looked like a cross between a tree and a spider, with bark-like skin and eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars. "We gather once more to guide the destiny of our galaxy," Vexnari said, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. Today we address the matter of the Outer Rim territorial disputes. For 3 hours, Jake listened as various species argued over mining rights, trade routes, and border claims. The debates were conducted with a level of sophistication that made his head spin. Delegates quoted thousand-year-old treaties, referenced laws written in dimensions that didn't exist anymore, and made arguments based on philosophical principles that humans hadn't even discovered yet. The Drachmarians wanted exclusive access to a system rich in exotic matter. The Zephyrians claimed ancient hereditary rights to the same space. The Ethereals argued that physical beings had no right to claim ownership of anything, while the crystalline beings called the Shapers insisted that only they could properly appreciate the mathematical beauty of the stellar formations in question. Jake found himself leaning forward, fascinated despite his exclusion. These weren't just political arguments, they were glimpses into entirely different ways of thinking about existence itself. Each species brought perspectives, shaped by millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of spacefaring civilization. When there was finally a break in the debate, Jake stood up. His platform wobbled slightly, drawing attention from nearby delegates. "Excuse me," he said, his voice somehow carrying across the chamber. Despite the primitive audio system in his section, the chamber fell silent. Thousands of eyes, sensors, and consciousness detection organs turned toward him. Jake felt like he was standing naked in front of the entire universe. "The human wishes to speak," announced Vexnari, and Jake could hear the amusement in the ancient being's voice. "How ... refreshing? Please, share your primitive wisdom with us." Jake felt his cheeks burn, but he pressed on. "I was wondering if anyone had considered asking the people who actually live in those systems what they want. The colonies, the trading posts, the research stations. Maybe they have opinions about who should control their homes." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, laughter began to ripple through the chamber. It started with the Drachmarians, their deep voices booming with mirth. The Ethereals joined in with sounds like shattering crystal. Even some of the more dignified species couldn't suppress their amusement. Admiral Castar's mental voice cut through Jake's mind like a knife. "The primitive believes that the opinions of settlers and traders matter in galactic politics." "How?" "Charmingly naive." "Perhaps," added Ambassador Ziegther of the Drachmarian Empire, his scales shifting to a color that Jake's translator told him meant contempt. "The human believes we should hold votes and let everyone have a say what's next." "Asking the livestock for their preferences?" The laughter grew louder. Jake sat down, his face burning with embarrassment. Amy reached over and squeezed his arm, but he could see the disappointment in her eyes. Ben was staring at his hands, and Lisa looked like she wanted to disappear. Just as the mockery reached its peak, every screen in the chamber flashed red. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Emergency alerts began scrolling across displays in a dozen different languages, all saying the same thing: unknown vessels detected in deep space. Massive energy signatures. Trajectory. Zentara Prime. High Counselor Vexnari's ancient voice cracked as he spoke. "All stations report status." A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. At first, Jake saw nothing unusual. Then, at the very edge of sensor range, dots began to appear. Small at first, but growing larger as the sensors got a better read on them. "Great Void," whispered someone near the center of the chamber. "What are those things?" The dots weren't ships in any sense that Jake understood. They were massive structures that seemed to fold space around themselves, existing partially in normal reality and partially somewhere else entirely. As he watched, they began to move, not through space but around it, bending the laws of physics to their will. "How many?" demanded Admiral Kestar, his mental voice now stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Sensors indicate at least 50 major vessels," reported a Zephyrian technician, his forearms dancing over holographic controls. "Each one is larger than our biggest dreadnoughts." "Energy readings are off the scale. Impossible," growled Ziegther. "No one has technology like that." Our intelligence networks would have detected any civilization capable of building such vessels. The unknown fleet continued its approach, and with each passing minute, the readings became more terrifying. These weren't just big ships, they were reality-altering constructs that operated on principles completely beyond current galactic understanding. Their very presence was causing space-time distortions that made nearby stars flicker and dance. Then came the message. It appeared on every screen simultaneously, translated instantly into every language known to galactic civilization. The voice that spoke it was ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of eons and the promise of endings. To the children playing with toys in this spiral arm of reality, we are the Void Corsairs, first and last children of the deep dark. We have returned to reclaim what was always ours. You have 7 of your rotations to prepare for judgment. Any who resist will be unmade. Any who submit may be permitted to continue existing in service to their betters. The message ended, and the chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, emergency communications channels lit up as governments across the galaxy received the same ultimatum, and the proud civilizations that had been arguing over mining rights moments before suddenly found themselves facing the prospect of total annihilation. Through it all, Jake sat quietly in his corner, watching and thinking, while the greatest minds in the galaxy panicked around him. He found himself studying the tactical displays, looking for patterns in the Corsairs' movements, trying to understand what they were really after. 7 days to prepare for judgment. But judgment for what? And why now, after disappearing for millennia, had they chosen this moment to return? As the chaos continued around him, Jake realized that the political games and territorial disputes that had seemed so important an hour ago were now meaningless. The galaxy faced a threat that made all their petty squabbles irrelevant. The question was, would they be able to put aside their pride and arrogance long enough to find a solution? Or would they spend their last week arguing about who was in charge while the universe's most ancient civilization prepared to erase them all? Looking around at the panic-stricken delegates, Jake wasn't optimistic. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice wondered if maybe, just maybe, the fact that no one expected anything from the humans might actually work in their favor. After all, when everyone else was thinking like generals and politicians, sometimes it helped to have someone who thought like a human being. The emergency session began at dawn, station time. Jake had barely slept, spending the night reading everything he could find about the Void Corsairs in the galactic databases. Most of the information was fragmentary, pieces of ancient legends, and half-remembered stories from the earliest days of space travel. What he found painted a picture of beings so advanced that they had transcended normal existence, becoming something between gods and nightmares. The council chamber had been reconfigured overnight. The elegant floating platforms were gone, replaced by a war room setup with tactical displays and communication arrays. Military officers from every major species stood around holographic battle maps, their faces grim as they studied the approaching threat. Jake and his team were still relegated to the outer edges, but now even that seemed like a blessing. From their position, they could observe without being directly involved in the increasingly frantic planning sessions taking place at the center of the room. "Status report," demanded Admiral Kestar, his mental presence radiating stress that made everyone nearby wince. General Thokmar of the Drakmarian Defense Fleet stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows over the tactical display. "We've lost contact with 3 frontier colonies. Kepler Station, New Byzantium, and the mining platform at Rigel 7 all went dark exactly 6 hours ago. Weapon signatures?" asked Commander Sylveth, the ethereal military liaison. Her crystalline form pulsed with anxious light patterns. "None detected, no explosions, no debris fields, no distress signals. They simply stopped existing." A chill ran through the chamber. Jake felt his stomach clench as he tried to imagine. Entire worlds full of people just disappearing without a trace. How did you fight an enemy that could make planets vanish? Our deep space monitors recorded massive gravitational anomalies at each location, continued Thokmar. The Corsair vessels appeared to phase in and out of normal space, bypassing all defensive systems. When they left, there was nothing but empty void where thriving worlds had been. High Counselor Vexenari's ancient voice creaked like old wood. In all my millennia, I have never seen technology capable of such precision destruction. They are not simply destroying these places, they are removing them from reality itself. The War Council erupted into arguments as different species proposed their own solutions. The Drakmarians wanted to mass their battle fleets for a direct assault, believing that superior firepower could overcome any technological advantage. The Zephyrians suggested coordinated strikes using their most advanced quantum weapons, while the crystalline shapers proposed creating dimensional barriers to prevent the Corsairs from phasing in and out of normal space. Every proposal was met with the same response from the tactical computers. Probability of success approaching 0. Jake watched from his corner as the galaxy's greatest military minds struggled with an enemy they couldn't understand. The Void Corsairs operated on principles that made no sense according to current science. Their ships existed partially outside of normal spacetime, making them immune to conventional weapons. They could appear anywhere without warning and disappear just as quickly. They had technology that could erase matter from existence itself. What about evacuation? Suggested someone from the inner circle. We could move the population of threatened worlds to secure locations. Secure locations? Admiral Kestar's mental voice dripped with bitter irony. Where exactly would those be? These beings can apparently travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly. No world is safe from them. As the debates continued, Jake found himself studying the pattern of attacks. Kepler Station had been a research facility studying exotic matter. New Byzantium was known for its universities and libraries. Rigel 7 was home to the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligence research. Each target had been carefully chosen, but for what purpose? They're not random, Jake said quietly to his team. Amy looked up from her own notes. What do you mean? The targets. They're not hitting military bases or major population centers? They're going after knowledge centers, research facilities, places where information is gathered and stored. Lisa frowned as she pulled up the tactical display on her personal device. You think they're trying to cripple our scientific capabilities? Maybe they're looking for something specific. Ben's engineering background made him think in practical terms. If I want to take over a civilization without destroying it completely, I'd target their technological infrastructure. First, make them helpless, then offer terms. The conversation was interrupted by another wave of red alerts flooding the chamber's displays. 3 more locations had gone dark: the archive world of Terminus, the Strategic Planning Center at Volf, 359, and the Galactic Communications Hub at Proxima Centauri. 6 worlds in 12 hours, whispered Commander Sylveth. At this rate, they'll have eliminated every major installation in the galaxy within a week. The panic in the chamber was becoming palpable. Delegates who had spent their careers projecting calm authority now openly showed their fear. The ethereals were flickering between dimensions in distress. The Drakmarians were pacing like caged animals, and even the ancient keepers seemed uncertain. Jake stood up. His platform wobbled slightly in the artificial gravity, drawing attention from the nearby delegates. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying further than it should have in the vast chamber. The argument stopped. Thousands of eyes turned toward him again, but this time the mood was different. Desperation had replaced contempt. "The human wishes to speak," announced Vexenari, though his tone was less mocking than before. Perhaps fresh eyes might see what experience has missed? Jake felt the familiar flush of embarrassment, but he pressed on. "I've been looking at the pattern of attacks. The Corsairs aren't hitting random targets. They're specifically going after research facilities, archives, and communication centers, places where information is stored or transmitted." "So," growled Thokmar, "what does it matter? They're destroying our infrastructure either way. But why those targets specifically?" If they wanted to conquer us, they'd hit military bases and planetary defenses. If they wanted to kill us, they'd target population centers. Instead, they're going after our knowledge base. Admiral Kestar's mental voice cut through Jake's thoughts. You think they fear our technology? That seems unlikely given their obvious superiority. No, not fear. But maybe they're trying to prevent us from learning something. Or maybe they're looking for something specific that they think we might have found. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the Corsairs were searching for something, it suggested they weren't all-knowing. If they were trying to prevent the galaxy from learning something, it implied there were limits to their power. What could beings with their technological capabilities possibly want from us? Asked Commander Silvath. Jake looked around the chamber at all the brilliant minds struggling with the same question he was. I don't know. But maybe the answer isn't about technology at all. Maybe it's about something else entirely. Such as? Vexnari prompted. Jake took a deep breath. When I was a kid, my grandfather told me stories about ancient civilizations on Earth. They all had one thing in common. They eventually fell because they became too proud, too convinced of their own superiority. What if the Corsairs aren't testing our weapons or our technology? What if they're testing something else? The silence that followed was different from before. Instead of mockery or dismissal, Jake sensed consideration. The delegates were actually thinking about what he had said. You believe this is some form of trial? Asked Vexnari. I think it's possible. Look at how this started. They didn't attack without warning. They gave us 7 days to prepare for judgment. Not conquest, not surrender. Judgment. Admiral Kestar's mental presence probed Jake's thoughts, looking for weaknesses in his reasoning. And what exactly are we being judged for? That's what we need to figure out. But I don't think we're going to find the answer by building bigger weapons or stronger shields. I think we need to understand who the Corsairs really are and why they disappeared in the first place. For the first time since the crisis began, the chamber was completely quiet. Jake could feel the weight of their attention, but also something else. Hope. Not much, but enough to matter. It's worth investigating, said Vexnari finally. But how do we gather information about beings who existed before most of our civilizations were born? Jake looked around the chamber one more time, seeing not enemies or rivals, but fellow beings facing the same terrifying unknown. We do what we should have been doing all along, he said. We work together. The plan was insane by any reasonable measure. Jake knew it, his crew knew it, and certainly every delegate in the council chamber knew it. But with less than 2 days remaining before the Corsairs' deadline, insane was all they had left. You want to do what? Admiral Kestar's mental voice was so sharp it made Jake's temples throb. I want to take my ship and go talk to them, Jake repeated calmly. Someone needs to make contact, and it might as well be someone they don't consider a threat. General Thokmar's scales had shifted to a deep red that Jake's translator identified as extreme agitation. Human, you don't seem to understand. These beings have erased 6 worlds from existence. They are not interested in conversation. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But they also haven't attacked the heart of galactic civilization yet. If they just wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. The fact that they're taking their time suggests they want something? The chamber had divided into 2 camps over the past day. The military faction, led by Thokmar and Kestar, wanted to make a stand with every available warship, hoping that combined firepower might find some weakness in the Corsairs' defenses. The scientific faction, guided by the Ancient Keepers, and the Ethereals, sought to understand the enemy before engaging them. Jake's proposal had created a third option that nobody liked. Even if you could somehow reach one of their vessels without being immediately destroyed, said Commander Silvath, her crystalline form pulsing with worried light patterns, what makes you think they would listen to you? You represent the youngest, least advanced species in the galaxy. Exactly, Jake said. Nobody important. Maybe that's exactly what they want to hear from. Amy stepped up beside him, her diplomat's training evident in the way she addressed the hostile chamber. Captain Morrison makes a valid point. Every attempt at communication so far has come from major military powers or ancient civilizations. Perhaps the Corsairs are waiting to hear from someone who approaches them as an equal rather than a supplicant or a challenger. Equal? Thokmar's laugh was like grinding stone. The human species has been in space for 50 years. The Corsairs were crossing dimensional barriers when our stars were still forming. In what universe are they equals? Ben looked up from the technical display he'd been studying. In a universe where technology isn't the only thing that matters. Look, I've been analyzing their ship movements and there's something weird about their pattern. They're not acting like conquerors or destroyers, they're acting like ... teachers. Teachers? Vexnari's ancient voice carried a note of curiosity. Each attack has been precise, surgical, designed to send a specific message. They could have wiped out entire sectors, but instead they're picking individual targets and making sure we all know about it. It's like they're running a classroom exercise and waiting to see how we respond. Lisa nodded, her pilot's instincts, agreeing with Ben's analysis. The way they move their ships, too. They're not trying to hide or be efficient. They're putting on a show, making sure we see exactly how outclassed we are. But why would they do that unless they wanted us to learn something from it? The debate continued for hours, but Jake could see that attitudes were slowly shifting. The complete failure of conventional military planning was making even the most hawkish delegates consider alternatives. When 3 more research facilities vanished during the discussion, the arguments became more desperate and less logical. Finally, High Counselor Vexnari called for silence. The humans' proposal has merit, if only because all other options have proven inadequate. But I cannot authorize such a mission without some form of protection. If nothing else, we need you to survive long enough to report back. What kind of protection? Jake asked. The Keepers have agreed to provide you with one of our quantum communication arrays, Vexnari explained. It will allow real-time contact with the Council regardless of distance or dimensional interference. Additionally, the Zephyrians have offered to equip your vessel with their most advanced sensor package. Admiral Kestar's mental voice carried reluctant approval. And I will provide you with a psionic beacon. If the worst happens, we will at least know immediately. The preparations took 18 hours that the galaxy couldn't spare. Jake watched teams of alien technicians swarm over the new horizon, installing equipment that was worth more than Earth's entire military budget. The quantum communicator alone represented technology that humanity wouldn't develop for centuries. This is crazy, Lisa muttered as she ran system checks on the upgraded engines. Half this stuff shouldn't even work with our primitive hardware. But it does work, Ben called from the engine room, his voice filled with wonder. The Zephyrians have somehow made their sensors interface with our navigation computers. I don't understand the physics, but I can read energy signatures that would have been invisible to us before. Amy was studying the diplomatic protocols that had been provided by various species, trying to prepare for a conversation with beings older than galactic civilization. I keep coming back to the same question, she said. What do they want? What could we possibly have that they need? Jake didn't have an answer. All he knew was that sitting in the council chamber arguing while worlds disappeared wasn't going to solve anything. At least by going out to meet the Corsairs, they might learn something useful before they died. The departure was less dramatic than Jake had expected. No crowds, no speeches, no formal ceremonies. Just 4 humans in an overpowered tugboat heading out into the void to attempt the impossible. The only acknowledgement of their mission was a brief message from Vexnari. May your courage prove greater than your foolishness. The journey to the edge of Corsair space took 6 hours at maximum. Burn. Jake spent the time studying everything the galactic databases contained about first contact protocols, though none of it seemed relevant to their current situation. How do you negotiate with beings who can erase you from existence with a thought? Contact. Lisa announced as they approached the coordinates where the Corsair fleet was last detected. I'm reading massive gravitational distortions dead ahead. Whatever's out there, it's big. The main screen flickered to life and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The Corsair flagship was impossible to describe in normal terms. It existed in at least 4 dimensions simultaneously, its surface shifting between states of matter like a living thing. Reality bent around it, creating rainbow patterns in the fabric of space itself. "It's beautiful," Amy whispered. "It's terrifying." Ben corrected. "Both," Jake said. "Open a channel on all frequencies. Let's see if anyone's home." The response was immediate. The space around their ship suddenly filled with a presence so vast and ancient that Jake's mind struggled to comprehend. This wasn't communication in any normal sense. It was pure consciousness touching consciousness, bypassing language entirely. "Welcome, little ones. We have been waiting for you to come." The voice spoke directly into their minds, carrying with it the weight of eons and the patience of stone. Jake felt like an ant trying to have a conversation with a mountain. We came to talk," Jake managed to say aloud, hoping his words would somehow reach the entity. "To understand what you want from us, what we want." The mental voice carried what might have been amusement. "Child, we want nothing from you. The question is what you want from yourselves." Jake felt the ship being drawn toward the massive construct, not by tractor beams or gravitational manipulation, but by something that worked on the level of space-time itself. There was no point in resisting. If the Corsairs had wanted to destroy them, they would already be dead. "Where are you taking us?" Amy asked. To understanding came the reply. "Your species has reached a crossroads, as all species must. The path you choose will determine not just your fate, but the fate of all who share this galaxy with you." As the New Horizon was pulled into the heart of the Corsair vessel, Jake realized that everything they thought they knew about this situation was wrong. The Corsairs hadn't come to conquer or destroy. They had come to teach. The question was, would humanity prove worthy of the lesson? The space Jake found himself in defied every law of physics he knew. He stood on what felt like solid ground, but when he looked down, he could see stars wheeling beneath his feet. The air tasted of electricity and ancient dreams, and somewhere in the distance he could hear the sound of galaxies singing to each other across the void. His crew was gone. The New Horizon was gone. He was alone in a place that existed between dimensions, face to face with something that had been old when the universe was young. The Corsair Prime materialized slowly, reality bending around its presence like light around a black hole. It was impossible to look at directly. Jake's eyes kept sliding away from its true form, catching only glimpses of crystalline structures, flowing energy, and geometries that hurt to perceive. When it spoke, the words formed directly in his mind without passing through his ears. "You are surprised to be alone," it said, and Jake could feel vast amusement in the mental voice. "Your companions are safe, experiencing their own revelations appropriate to their natures. But you, Jake Morrison, of Earth, you are here because you asked the right questions." "What questions?" Jake managed to say, though he wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or just thought the words. "You wondered why we returned. You saw patterns where others saw only destruction. You understood that this was not about conquest or even communication, but about something far more important." The space around them shifted, and suddenly Jake was looking at a 3-dimensional map of galactic history. He watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean, each one reaching heights of technological achievement before collapsing into war, decadence, or simple entropy. "We were the first," the Corsair Prime continued. "The first to reach beyond our world, the first to master the forces that bind reality together, the first to believe we were gods. And like all who came after us, we nearly destroyed everything in our pride." Jake watched the ancient civilization spread across the galaxy, their technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. They reshaped worlds, created artificial stars, and bent the laws of physics to their will. For 1,000,000 years, they were the undisputed masters of existence. Then came the war. The details were too complex for Jake's mind to fully grasp, but he understood the essential truth. The Corsairs had split into factions, each believing their vision of the future was the only correct one. Their conflict had raged across dimensions, threatening to unravel the very fabric of space-time itself. We, Learn too late that power without wisdom leads only to destruction, the Prime said. When we finally understood what we had become, most of our kind chose extinction rather than continue existing as weapons. But a few of us remained, transforming ourselves into guardians, watching over the civilizations that would come after. Yes, you're testing us, Jake said, understanding flooding through him. All of this, the attacks, the ultimatum, it's all a test to see if we'll make the same mistakes you did. Every few million years, galactic civilization reaches a critical point. Species develop technology capable of reshaping reality itself. Some learn wisdom and transcend their limitations. Others follow our path and destroy themselves. Most fall somewhere between, stagnating in cycles of war and temporary peace until they fade into irrelevance. Jake watched the historical display continue, seeing the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Some few achieved a state of peaceful coexistence that lasted for millions of years before they voluntarily departed for higher dimensions. Many more destroyed themselves in wars that left entire sectors of space barren and lifeless. And where do we fit in that pattern? Your current galactic civilization shows all the signs of approaching the critical point. Advanced technology, territorial expansion, growing tensions between major powers. Left to your natural development, you have perhaps 1,000 years before the wars begin that will either elevate you or destroy you. So you decided to accelerate the timeline. We provide a test that reveals true nature without requiring the usual cost in lives and worlds. How species react to an existential threat tells us everything we need to know about their fundamental character. Jake thought about the chaos in the council chambers. The way different species had responded to the crisis. The military powers wanted to fight you directly. The scientific factions wanted to understand you first. And the smaller species ... were dismissed and ignored as always. The Corsair Prime's mental voice carried infinite sadness. The same patterns repeat across time and space. The strong dominate the weak. The advanced mock the primitive, and cooperation only exists when it serves immediate self-interest. But that's not entirely true, Jake said, remembering moments from the past few days. I saw ethereals sharing technology with species they normally considered beneath notice. I watched Drakmarian warriors taking orders from Zephyrian scientists without question. Fear made them work together in ways they never had before. Fear is a beginning, but it is not enough. True cooperation must come from choice, not desperation. It must be sustainable across generations, not just during moments of crisis. The space around them shifted again, and Jake found himself looking at Earth. Not the Earth he knew, but Earth as it might become given different choices. In some visions, he saw humanity spreading across the galaxy as conquerors, subjugating other species and repeating the ancient patterns of dominance. In others, he saw them fading into obscurity, never reaching beyond their solar system. But in a few images, he saw something different. Humans working alongside aliens as genuine equals, sharing knowledge and resources, exploring the universe together rather than competing for control of it. What makes the difference? He asked. The willingness to serve something greater than oneself, the courage to remain humble in the face of vastness, the wisdom to know that strength shared is strength multiplied. Jake thought about his own journey to this moment. He had volunteered for a mission that offered no glory, no advancement, no recognition. He had endured mockery and dismissal without striking back. He had chosen to seek understanding rather than revenge. You want us to be teachers, he said suddenly. Not just humanity, but all the species. You want us to learn how to guide each other instead of fighting each other. The Corsair Prime's presence seemed to brighten with something like joy. In all our testing across the eons, few beings have grasped this truth so quickly. Most think in terms of punishment and reward, victory and defeat. You see the deeper purpose. I'm not special, Jake said. I'm just someone who learned to listen more than I talk. Perhaps that is what makes you special. The revelation that followed was overwhelming. The Corsairs offered humanity a choice that had never been given to any species before. They could return to their old patterns, competing and fighting and struggling for dominance until they either transcended or destroyed themselves. Or they could accept a different role entirely. We offer to teach you what we have learned across the eons. Not our technology, which would only accelerate your development without providing wisdom, but our understanding of what it means to guide without controlling, to protect without dominating, to serve something greater than your own interests. And in return, you become what we once were, guardians of galactic civilization. You help other species navigate the trials that lie ahead. You ensure that the next million years see growth instead of stagnation, cooperation instead of endless conflict. Jake understood the magnitude of what was being offered. Humanity would become the teachers and guides for countless species across the galaxy. They would help civilizations avoid the pitfalls that led to destruction while supporting those ready to transcend their limitations. Why us? Why not the Drachmarians with their military experience? Or the Ethereals with their advanced science, or the Keepers with their ancient wisdom? Because they think they already know the answers. You still remember how to ask the right questions. The choice was his to make, not just for himself, but for his entire species. The weight of it was almost unbearable. But as Jake thought about the past few days, about the mockery and dismissal, about the fear and desperation, about the brief moments of genuine cooperation that had emerged from crisis, he knew what his answer had to be. "We'll do it," he said. "We'll try to be worthy of the trust you're placing in us." The Corsair Prime's form began to shift, reality bending around them both. And then, impossibly, the ancient being that had existed since the dawn of time, that possessed technology capable of rewriting the laws of physics, that had the power to erase entire civilizations from existence, slowly lowered itself until it was kneeling before Jake Morrison, a human who 6 months ago had been commanding a freight hauler between Earth and Mars. "You honor us with your acceptance," the Prime said, and Jake felt the sincerity of those words echo through dimensions. "May your species prove worthy of the gift we offer, and may the galaxy grow brighter under your guidance." When Jake opened his eyes, he was back aboard the New Horizon with his crew, but everything had changed. The Corsair fleet was gone, vanished, as quickly as it had appeared. In their place was a small device that hummed with barely contained energy, a gift from beings older than stars, containing knowledge that would reshape galactic civilization. The journey back to Zentara Prime took place in stunned silence. "How do you explain that you've just volunteered?"